All right, welcome to Study Group. Welcome, Chuck.
Thank you, Derek.
Welcome, everyone at home. Welcome, Kitty. Today, we're going to go on a deeper dive on Jesus' Discourse on True Values. And this is a study off of the AI animation from the channel, if you remember, that we previously brought up, called The Sermons of Jesus from the Urantia book. And those are some AI animations of different sermons that Jesus did throughout his life. So to continue on our study on this, we're going to be talking about true values. And in this one, we're going to be talking with Angamon of the Stoics.
Exactly. So Jesus, when he was in Rome with Ganid and Ganad, made a point of finding the leaders of the religious and philosophical movements that were then present in Rome. And these were the gentile leaders of religion and philosophy. So he made a point of meeting them, making their acquaintance, and instructing them in the gospel, which what would later become known as the gospel, so that when the Christians began to come to Rome in the not too distant future, they would find receptivity. There would be people in Rome, and particularly these leaders, who would understand what they were talking about and be able to respond and build a movement. So Christianity kind of to a large extent, grew out of these efforts that Jesus made in Rome. And this is a particularly important one because the Stoics, he met with Angamon, they say was the leader of the Stoics. And the Stoic philosophy, I didn't really realize quite how important it was, but it had very high moral standards, and it was what the book Urantia book refers to as the superior philosophy of the better classes in Rome. And they go so far as to say that the ideals of Stoicism and the sublime morality of Stoicism was never been transcended by any purely human system of philosophy.
Right.
So they had really achieved something there, and he wanted to build on that because he knew there would be receptivity. So this short discourse about true values was an important piece, probably, in Angamon's preparation. And they go on to say that he subsequently became a great friend of Paul and proved to be one of the strong supporters of the Christian church at Rome. So this was successful. You might call it a success on Jesus's part. But he spoke to the Mithraics, he spoke to others. It wasn't just this guy. There's a whole group that he had rounded up, but this was particularly successful and important, so they make a point of it.
Okay. So let's get started with what he said.
Yeah, let's do.
So in substance and restated in modern phraseology, Jesus taught Angamon, the standard of true values must be looked for in the spiritual world and on divine levels of eternal reality. To an ascending mortal, all lower and material standards must be recognized as transient, partial, and inferior. So in the human experience, nothing is completely real because it's not fully spiritual. So there are values that come from spirit levels, but in the human experience, it's incomplete almost. So our standards are a little bit transient in its nature, but nonetheless, it comes from a value level, a spirit level.
Right, that's the idea. Right. So material things pass away. Material things are not enduring, including our body and the world. All our possessions, and they'll eventually disintegrate. But spiritual values are eternal and can be. And so he's saying if you want to look for permanence of spirit influence, you have to look on the divine levels of eternal reality. And these are big concepts that he's sharing with Angamon. So it must have been kind of exciting for Angamon to hear these words.
Well, they're very philosophic.
They're philosophic, but they stretch the mind. What does he mean by divine levels of eternal reality? I just find that phrase to be so intriguing. Even if I don't quite grasp what it really fully means, it points in a direction of growth, kind of an open-ended, higher level of possibility.
And what reality is. So I think throughout this whole study, it's showing where values come from.
Right, the true nature of reality.
Which is spirit, and which is true reality.
Right. So true reality has true values. So that's what we're going to be talking about here.
Yeah. Okay. Want to hit the next one?
Sure. So Jesus goes on to say, The scientist, as such, is limited to the discovery of the relatedness of material facts. Technically, he has no right to assert that he is either materialist or idealist, for in so doing, he has assumed to forsake the attitude of a true scientist, since any and all such assertions of attitude are the very essence of philosophy. So, for any of you who've spent much time with the Urantia book, you'll know that there's science, philosophy, and religion are the two main avenues of approach to our understanding. Three main avenues. I can't count today. Three main avenues of approach to understanding reality. And not to say that science isn't an important part of that, but the scientist should do science, and then the philosopher does philosophy. So he's sorting this out. He's trying to help Angamon to understand that these are different disciplines. And science was a thing in those days. You know, the Greeks had begun to explore what can be called science as early as the 6th century BC. And they had astronomy and mathematics and geometry and all these things. So science was not unheard of. Mm-hmm. And he's not putting it down, but he's saying that, look, if you want to find ideals, then that's going to be a pursuit of philosophy. And then he's going to go on to talk about the true values that are discovered on spirit levels.
Okay. So he goes on to say, unless the moral insight and the spiritual attainment of mankind are proportionately augmented, the unlimited advancement of a purely materialistic culture may eventually become a menace to civilization. So that's kind of saying how the spiritual progress and moral insight needs to be proportional to the material advancement. Otherwise, you can't have a purely physical society that can lead to the detriment of human progress.
Right, right. So keeping them in balance is kind of where we're going with this. Science, philosophy, and religion need to be kept in balance. If the material achievements become too much of a fascination unto themselves, then, you know, that can lead in directions that can eventually become a menace. You know, like we think of in our time, you know, the science that goes into the development of weapons,
absolutely.
For example, or other, you know, we can probably think of some other examples too, but that's an example of science sort of run amok.
Well, it's when profit motive is not in service mode. It hasn't gone into the service mode. And that's what this whole service to society is for scientists and others.
Yeah, right.
To serve the human needs.
Serve human needs.
Human progress.
So develop moral insights and spiritual attainment, you know, interest in God and spiritual values, all of that needs to be developed proportionally to the material achievements so that they, you know, again, stay in balance.
Right.
Should I go on to the next one here?
Yes, please.
Okay. A purely materialistic science harbors within itself the potential seed of the destruction of all scientific striving. For this very attitude presages the ultimate collapse of a civilization which has abandoned its sense of moral values and has repudiated its spiritual goal of attainment. So he's kind of saying the same thing in different words. But, you know, again, you don't want material interests to run away with the game, you know, because if you go down that road, that contains within itself, as he's saying, this potential seed of the destruction of all aspects of a civilization, including the scientific striving. So he's really stressing the importance of not abandoning moral values and spiritual goal attainment. Yeah. Let me just read this next one. Yeah, go ahead. I think it's kind of important how it plays off of that. Yeah, it helps explain it. The materialistic scientist and the extreme idealist are destined always to be at loggerheads. This is not true of those scientists and idealists who are in possession of a common standard of high moral values and spiritual test levels. So I think that there's a couple things here. One being that the concept of materialist and idealist being at loggerheads, but yet there's also like it's not just two sides. It's like a trinity, right? So there's like religion, science, and philosophy. Right. So there is a balance that can be achieved that's kind of
super additive or whatever. Like it grows, right? Exponential, or perhaps, and then it's not trying to find that dualistic balance between just science and religion.
Right. Philosophy kind of bridges between them.
Yeah, but yet even those who are just perhaps scientists and or idealists, they can be in alignment of certain moral values. Perhaps.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Even if you don't call one coming from God or one not coming from God, however that works out, there's still maybe a moral agreement on.
Right. There's a common ground.
Yeah.
A shared common ground of moral concern and grasp of moral values. So whether you're a scientist or a philosopher or a religionist or whatever you're doing, within a surviving civilization, there needs to be a common ground of moral values that can sustain the growth and development of that civilizational project, such as it may be. And he also brings up spiritual test levels, which I think is interesting because there's morality, but then there's spirituality. And the morals tend to flow from the spirit. That's where we find values, is from the spirit level. So this idea of spiritual test levels, that's kind of a old school sort of biblical idea.
What is it? You maybe give your testimony, right?
Yeah.
The Spirit testifies.
That's part of it.
You.
That's part of it. And that it involves, at least from what we find in the Bible, it involves, where did I write that down? It involves commitment to prayer, spending time with God, and study of whatever teachings elevate and uplift your heart. And also the reliance on the Spirit. The Holy Spirit, the Spirit of truth that lives within you. You know, these are how we test proposals in the culture. If you want to apply a spiritual test to an idea, then you go within, you go to your best teachings, you go to prayer, you engage in these kind of activities that elevate your mind and bring spirit influence in. And that can be a common standard. Within a particular culture.
Well, it reminds me how the Urantia book talks about how the spirit of truth is the conviction of truth, not the sound of truth.
Right.
So that's like an important test.
Yeah, you feel that.
For one to, a standard for one to have.
Yeah, right.
It's not just the sound of authority or whatever. It's a conviction. It's a...
Yeah,
it's
like a heartfelt.
There's a testifying going on,
Yeah. So yeah.
That's
interesting how test and testify are related. It's like, But having convictions that are to some degree held in common and within the population will sort of that'll create a safety net for the quality of a civilization so it doesn't decline.
Yeah.
Even if the idealists and the scientists don't always agree because they're doing different things, they have different responsibilities, but they should all have a common standard of high moral values.
Yeah, that can be a little deceptive. I mean,
there's so many corrupt.
Well, you can have like a declared stance on morality, but yet then not treat the person right in front of you morally. Yeah.
Right. You can mistreat somebody while you're preaching moral values.
Well, I just look at some of the hypocrisy that comes between the arguments between science and religion back and forth.
Sure.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So he's, proposing that you transcend those arguments.
Right. Well, they all have a part to play.
Yeah. Not science and philosophy and religion are always going to be important.
Yeah.
And people will choose careers even in those areas, and that's important and good. But it needs to be held together. There needs to be some unifying factor that keeps it all focused on the advancement of that particular society or culture.
Well, that's why it helps to have God as that unifying first source and center, as opposed to just all from you and your cleverness.
Right.
You don't need a creator, focal point of all existence in order to obtain those values.
Yeah.
And so there becomes a little bit of a like unwitting self-deification as opposed to understanding your position in the family and the structure of the family.
The overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, the greater good. And, money can be an influence in this.
Well, even if both the scientists and the religionists' intentions are to serve the greater good of the whole, serve human progress.
That's a good start.
That validates their existence for sure.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, there's a higher understanding of where goodness comes from.
Right. Yeah.
So,
So that's it's going to continue to talk about that, I think.
All right, you want to read this one?
Yeah. All right. So he says, in every age, scientists and religionists must recognize that they are on trial before the bar of human need. Interesting way of putting that. They must eschew all warfare between themselves while they strive valiantly to justify their continued survival by enhanced devotion to the service of human progress. So this is a standard that can be applied.
Yeah, he's defining what the standard is for scientists, and that is to uphold loyalty to serving the human needs,
right,
in support of progress for each human.
Yeah, and science has been a huge part of that.
Yeah,
just understanding how the material level of reality works and how to purify water or how to grow better crops, or there's so many ways that science serves the betterment of civilization. But it can go off track. Instead, you can make some really good bombs, figure out how to destroy a lot of people. So that's a tricky thing.
Yeah, that's where morality hasn't grown in the same accordance as the materialistic.
And that's where religion should step in. So in saying religionists are also on trial before this same bar of human
buddy,
need.
we live on a planet where religion tells you to do the bombing too sometimes.
Sometimes it does.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if religion is serving its true purpose, then it's going to have a unifying effect, because it's going to create a growing recognition of God, which is there's only one God. It's like the higher levels of reality are one, and we can learn about that and be loyal to that, and that can guide and influence our development. But it'll influence everyone together, and the whole the boat. What's the expression? I don't know. Raise all boats, kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why both are so important.
Yeah, well, that one statement early on of not really upholding the morality kind of leads us into this last slide here. So,
okay.
If the so-called science or religion of any age is false, then must it either purify its activities or pass away before the emergence of a material science or spiritual religion of a truer and more worthy order. So that's kind of saying that it is inevitable that if you're not upholding that standard that he just previously mentioned, that you will go away.
Yeah.
There's a shelf life for you.
Right. Very definitely. It'll cease to have relevance or value.
In one way or another. I mean, you could have like an overgrowth of materialistic, self-centered countries or whatever that just blow each other off the face of the earth or whatever, right? There's one way to go away.
Yeah.
Or that there's a moral standard that's upheld, and so certain things don't get the attention and money that they require to exist anymore.
Right.
That's another way.
So he's proposing an evolutionary perspective that's going forward, to these higher levels of possibility. And everybody has a part to play in that. And if that's not happening, either individually or culturally, that culture is going to decline because it's not evolving into a higher perspective that can create the kind of good growth, that we all hope for in our lives.
Yeah. The whole science versus religion thing isn't really necessary.
No, it's not.
It takes a little philosophy within the individual in order to balance some of those things out. But
but it really helps if the scientists have some sense of the reality of God and how that affects the creation of the universe, and if the religionists have some common sense about physical things too. That also is helpful. So to move away from superstition, because religion has been plagued with superstition, and science has helped to mitigate that. So there's a back and forth. There's an important role that each play in relation to the other.
Superstition and fetishization on both sides, I would say.
Well, it can be, yeah.
And then there can be just kind of a bit of a nihilistic approach of just staying out of all of it. And
and then there's that alternative.
You can take even a philosophical approach of saying, if I can't explain. None of us can explain what God is. So why should we say? Or none of us really know.
Or that could be said.
Something like that, right?
Right. But the whole point of this discourse is about true values. The true values do exist.
Yeah.
And that they come from the spirit level.
Even the person who would just argue what I was just saying, in more of a Gnostic perspective, they would still adhere to values.
Yeah, they get their values from somewhere, even if they don't know where.
Yeah, whether they acknowledge the source of the values or not, they have a conviction from the spirit truth. There's testifying that's going on there.
So the idea of values being true, that kind of goes along with those primary values of truth, beauty, and goodness, you know, that we hear so much about, that those are the values that are associated with divinity. Divinity is associated with unity and progress and all the good things we hope for. So talking about true values is a little bit like talking about good values or beautiful values.
Or real values.
Real values. Loving values.
Yeah.
All those value levels kind of go together. They inform and inspire each other.
Cool. Well, good stuff. Well, thanks, Chuck.
Yeah.
Thanks you guys at home for joining us.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kitty. And we'll leave a link to this sermon for the other YouTube channel.
Yeah, great.
Join us for the next one. I think we might do Discourse on True Religion, perhaps.
Yeah, and thanks to Angamon for hanging in there and doing whatever he did.
Yeah.
We're feeling some benefit from all of this, even today.
All right.
So.
All right, well, see you on the next one.
All right, thanks for joining us.